They say a marriage is built on trust, but my husband, Ferdinand, was building a skyscraper of lies, and I was just the foundation he was ready to bury. My name is Maggie, and on our 8th wedding anniversary, I didn't get a gift. I got a cold email and a silence so loud it cracked my heart open. The table was a graveyard of cold luxury. I had spent 3 hours searing Wagyu short ribs and another 2 arranging ivory linens and vintage red wine. It was June 12th, our 8th anniversary and Ferdinand's 36th birthday. Beside my chair, Booma, my scruffy, wire-haired terrier, sat like a silent sentinel. With his messy fur and alert dark eyes, he was the only soul in the house who seemed to appreciate the effort. Every time a car engine hummed in the distance, Booma's ears would prick up, his small tail giving a single, hopeful thump against the hardwood. But as the clock ticked past 10 p.m., even Booma seemed to sense the shift in the air. He let out a soft, low whine and rested his chin on my foot, his rough coat a grounding comfort against my skin. Then, the ping of the notification shattered the quiet. Not a call, not a happy anniversary. Major emergency with Ray Watts. Big client, can't leave the office. Don't wait up, we'll make it up later. No love, Ferdinand. No, I'm sorry. Just a digital shrug. I looked at the custom cake in the fridge, to Ferdinand, happy birthday and anniversary, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I didn't know then that Ray Watts wasn't just a client. He was the ticket Ferdinand was using to escape our boring life. And I certainly didn't know that while I was blowing out the candles alone, Ferdinand was already packing his brown leather shoes for a life I wasn't invited to. The house was empty, but as I looked at Booma's steady, loyal gaze, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. The storm was coming. And for the first time in 8 years, I was starting to wake up. Have you ever had a gut feeling that someone was lying to you, even when everything looked perfect? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for Chapter 2. The next morning, the silence in the house wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. I woke up still in my anniversary dress, the fabric wrinkled and smelling of perfume. Booma was already awake, sitting by the door with his head cocked, his scruffy terrier ears twitching at every floorboard creak. I tried calling Ferdinand 3 times before 8 a.m., straight to voicemail. By noon, the anxiety in my chest felt like a physical weight. I dialed his firm. "Real estate associates, how can I help you?" the receptionist asked. "Hi, this is Maggie. Is Ferdinand in a meeting with Ray Watts?" There was a long, hesitant pause. "Oh, Maggie, I am so sorry. Ferdinand resigned 3 days ago. He didn't leave any forwarding information. We thought you knew." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I grabbed Booma from the car and drove home, my heart hammering. I burst through the front door. My eyes went straight to the shoe rack. A glaring, empty Gap sat in the second row. Ferdinand's favorite hand-stitched brown leather shoes, the ones he wore when he wanted to look like a man who owned the room, were gone. "Ferdinand," I called out. No answer, only the frantic click-clack of Booma's claws as he raced toward the bedroom. I followed him and froze. Ferdinand was there, tossing silk ties into a massive designer suitcase. Beside him, on the bed, was a crisp white envelope. "You're back early," he said, his voice as flat as a dial tone. He didn't even look up. "You're resigned?" I gasped. 3 days ago? Ferdinand, what is happening? He finally looked at me, but his eyes were like flint. He reached for the envelope and slid it toward me. "I've accepted a position in Albuquerque with the Watts Group. Ray Watts doesn't hire people with domestic baggage." I looked at the envelope. In bold, cold letters, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." "Baggage?" I whispered. "I've worked 2 jobs to keep this house running while you chased commissions. I've been your ghost for 8 years."
"And that's the problem, Maggie," he snapped, zipping the suitcase with a sharp, final sound. "You're small town. You're dusty. I need a life that shines. Don't make this difficult." He brushed past me, his expensive cologne filling the space where my breath should have been. Booma let out a sharp, protective bark, baring his teeth at the man who had been his master since he was a pup. Ferdinand didn't even glance at him. He walked out, the click of the lock sounding like a gavel.
The silence that followed the door slam was the heaviest I'd ever felt. Booma didn't bark again. He just stood by the entryway, his wire-haired tail tucked low, sniffing at the empty spot on the rug where Ferdinand's suitcase had sat moments before. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked over to the desk in the corner, the one Ferdinand always told me not to touch. For 8 years, I'd respected his professional privacy. Now, that respect felt like a chain I'd finally broken. I pulled open the drawers. Most were empty, cleared out while I was at work, but at the very bottom, shoved behind old tax returns, I found a leather-bound book, our high school graduation album. I flipped the pages, the scent of old paper rising up. I found Ferdinand's photo, a boy with a bowl cut, thick glasses, and a nervous, crooked smile. He had spent a fortune on veneers and laser surgery to bury that boy. Then my finger stopped on a photo in the B section. Brooke Ellis. Back then, she was a shadow. Frizzy hair, acne, a shy downward gaze. We'd shared a locker row for 3 years. She was the girl everyone overlooked, including Ferdinand. My phone buzzed. A text from Benjamin, my oldest friend. "Hey Mags, just saw a weird post. Did Ferdinand join the Watts group in New Mexico? I thought you guys were Denver for life." I called him immediately. "He left, Ben. Today. Divorce capers on the bed." 30 minutes later, Benjamin was in my kitchen pouring the wine I'd bought for the anniversary. Booma jumped into his lap, sensing the calm energy Ben always brought. "It's not just a job, is it?" I asked, sliding the yearbook across the counter. Benjamin looked at Brooke's old photo, then pulled out his phone. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, Maggie, but my sister works in New Mexico real estate. She sent me a photo from the Ray Watts Gala last week." He turned the screen toward me. There was Ferdinand, looking like a king in a custom tuxedo, and beside him, draped in silk and diamonds, was a woman who looked like a Hollywood star. Sharp jawline, perfect nose, blonde waves, an expensive smile. "That's Brooke?" I whispered. "That's Brooke now," Benjamin said grimly. "She's Ray Watts's only daughter. She went through a massive rebranding in New York. New face, new name, new pedigree. Ferdinand didn't just find a new job. He found a shortcut to the top of the food chain." I looked at the photo again. The woman in the picture was flawless, but as I stared into her eyes, I saw the same insecure girl from the back of the classroom. Ferdinand thought he was trading up for a masterpiece. He didn't realize he was marrying a woman who was just as fake as he was. Now to accounting form. The moonlight was cold over the parking lot of the old brewery where our high school reunion was in full swing. I sat in my car for a long moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Booma sat in the passenger seat, his wire-haired chin resting on the dashboard, watching the neon sign flicker. "Stay put, buddy," I whispered, reaching over to scratch his scruffy ears. "I won't be long." I looked in the rearview mirror. I wasn't wearing diamonds. I hadn't changed my face. I wore a simple black dress and the wine-colored lipstick I'd bought for an anniversary that never happened. I just wanted to look like Maggie. Inside, the room was a blur of loud laughter. I spotted Benjamin near the bar. He gave me a steady, encouraging nod, but my eyes were drawn to the center of the room. There they were, Ferdinand and Brooke. Ferdinand looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury watch advertisement. Beside him, Brooke was radiant. Her skin was porcelain, her teeth a dazzling, unnatural white. She looked like a masterpiece of modern medicine.
I walked straight toward them. The conversation died. Ferdinand's smile vanished, his face turning the color of ash. "Maggie," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" "I paid the registration fee a month ago, Ferdinand," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I didn't think I'd have to see my husband and his new life so soon, though." Brooke tilted her head, her sharp blue eyes narrowing. "So you're the wife. Ferdinand said you were struggling." "I'm struggling with the trash he left behind, Brooke," I replied. I turned to Ferdinand. "I saw the wedding announcement you drafted. Fast work. Almost as fast as your plastic surgeon worked on Brooke here." Brooke's hand flew to her throat. Ferdinand stepped forward, his voice a low hiss. "Don't be petty, Maggie. This is a professional circle. Ray is right here." I looked at Ray Watts, who was watching with a calculating expression. Then I looked back at Brooke. I leaned in close. "I remember the girl with the frizzy hair and the bunny teeth, Brooke. And Ferdinand, I remember the boy with the thick glasses and the acne. You can buy all the silk and skin you want, but you can't hide who you really are." I turned to Ray Watts. "Good luck with your new EVP, Ray. He's very good at pretending to be something he isn't. Just ask his first wife." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out, my heels clicking firmly. As I reached the car, Booma let out a happy yip. I started the engine and drove away from the brewery, leaving the ghosts behind. I hadn't won a war, but for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I finally owned my own skin.
1 year later, the Colorado mountain air felt crisper than it ever had in the suffocating hallways of my marriage. I had moved into a sun-drenched apartment in Boulder with Booma, who now spent his afternoons napping on a balcony overlooking the Flatirons. I worked reduced hours, painted on weekends, and occasionally grabbed coffee with Benjamin, whose steady friendship had become the anchor I didn't know I needed. I had blocked Ferdinand's number months ago, but fate has a way of bypassing a block list. One rainy Tuesday, my office phone rang. I picked up, expecting a billing inquiry. Instead, there was a heavy, ragged silence. "Maggie?" The voice was hollow, stripped of the executive vice president polish. It was Ferdinand. "I'm at work, Ferdinand. We have nothing to discuss," I said, my hand tightening on the receiver. Booma, sensing my tension from across the room, hopped off the sofa and trotted over, resting his scruffy head on my knee. "The baby was born," Ferdinand whispered. "A girl. Brooke, she won't even look at her." I stayed silent. My heart didn't ache for him, but it twinged for an innocent child. "She doesn't look like Brooke," he continued, his voice cracking. "She doesn't look like the woman I married. She has frizzy red hair, and her jaw, it's recessed. She looks like someone I don't recognize. I did a DNA test, Maggie. I thought maybe Brooke had cheated, but the test came back positive. She's mine. She's ours." I let out a breath I'd been holding for a year. "She looks like the girl in the yearbook, Ferdinand, the one you tried to pretend never existed." "Brooke is hysterical," he choked out. "She calls the baby a throwback. She's already talking about surgeons when the girl turns 18. Ray Watts is furious because the image of his perfect family is cracking. The high society friends are whispering. They're asking where these genes came from." I looked down at Booma. He was scruffy, unpolished, and exactly who he was supposed to be. There was a profound beauty in his honesty that Ferdinand would never understand. "You spent a fortune trying to edit your lives, Ferdinand," I said, my voice steady and cold. But the truth showed up in the delivery room. "What do I do?" he pleaded. "Be a father," I said. "For the first time in your life, try being real, because that little girl is the only thing in your house that isn't a lie." I hung up before he could respond. I walked to the balcony and opened the door, letting the fresh mountain wind fill the room. Behind me, Booma let out a sharp, happy bark, chasing a stray leaf across the floor.
Ferdinand and Brooke were trapped in a palace of mirrors, staring at a reflection they hated. But as I watched the sunset turn the peaks purple, I realized I didn't need a new face or a new name to be happy. I just needed to be Maggie. The fallout from Ferdinand's perfect life didn't stay behind closed doors for long. In the high-stakes world of Ray Watts, image wasn't just a preference, it was the currency, and Ferdinand and Brooke were suddenly bankrupt. A few months after that frantic phone call, Benjamin stopped by my apartment with a box of pastries and a look on his face that said he had news. Booma, ever the judge of character, greeted him with a frantic tail wag, his scruffy terrier body wiggling with genuine joy. "You haven't checked the business journals, have you?" Benjamin asked, setting a coffee down. "Ray Watts pulled Ferdinand's executive title last week. Word is, the tension between Brooke and Ferdinand became a liability." They were fighting in the office, screaming about genetic betrayals and plastic surgery receipts. Ray sidelined Ferdinand to a basement office in a suburban branch, and Brooke, well, she's filed for legal separation. I looked at the window, watching the golden Colorado light. "And the baby?" "Ray's wife is raising her for now," Benjamin said softly. "Brooke is in New York, supposedly getting revision work done. She couldn't handle looking at a child who reminded her of the face she spent $1 million to erase. It's a mess, Maggie." I felt a pang of pity for that little girl, but for Ferdinand, nothing. He had chased a shadow and ended up in the dark. "You know," Benjamin said, his voice dropping an octave, "I've been thinking about what you said at the reunion, about not needing a mask. I've always liked your face exactly the way it is, frown lines, laugh lines, and all." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. For 8 years, I had been a trophy to be polished. With Benjamin, I was just a person to be known. Booma let out a soft huff and rested his chin on our joined hands, his rough terrier fur a reminder of everything real and unedited in my world. "I'm not looking for a skyscraper anymore, Ben," I said, squeezing his hand back. "I'm perfectly happy with a view of the mountains and someone who knows my name without checking a marriage certificate." Ferdinand had wanted a life that sparkled. I had found a life that breathed. And as Booma drifted off to sleep at our feet, I knew which one was worth more. One rainy Tuesday, a familiar but battered black sedan pulled up to the curb in Boulder. I watched a man step out who looked 10 years older than the Ferdinand I'd known. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a generic jacket that hung loose on his shoulders. Even from the second floor, I could see his posture was broken. Booma immediately sensed the change. His scruffy ears went flat, and a low, grumbling growl started in his chest. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't offer a welcome-back bark. He stood between me and the door, a small, wire-haired wall of loyalty. A hesitant knock echoed. I opened the door just a crack, the security chain still engaged. "Maggie," Ferdinand whispered. His eyes were bloodshot. "I lost the New Mexico house. Brooke is suing for everything, and Ray Watts blacklisted me. He said I was a brand disaster." I didn't invite him in. I didn't offer him coffee. I just watched him. "I made a mistake, Mags," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought I wanted the gold in the glass, but it's all fake. Brooke is already looking for her next upgrade. I miss the quiet. I miss you." He reached out, but Booma let out a sharp, warning snap that made Ferdinand flinch. "You don't miss me, Ferdinand," I said, my voice as steady as the mountains. "You miss the person who cleaned up your messes. You called me dusty and domestic baggage. You told me a real wife doesn't need reminders." "I was wrong," he pleaded. "Can we just talk for the sake of the 8 years?" "Those 8 years were a down payment on a house you burned down yourself. I'm not a backup plan, and I'm certainly not a sanctuary for a man who only values the truth when the lies stop working." I looked down at Booma, whose dark eyes were fixed on Ferdinand with pure judgment. The only person in this hallway who is exactly who they say they are is this dog, and even he doesn't want you here. I closed the door. I didn't wait for him to walk away. I simply grabbed Booma's leash and my jacket. "Come on, Booma," I said. "Benjamin is waiting for us at the trailhead." As we walked toward the sun-drenched hills, I didn't look back. The Chapter 2 Ferdinand wanted was a ghost story, and I was busy writing a brand new book.
3 years had passed since the day Ferdinand stood on my doorstep with a broken spirit and a hollow apology. My life in Boulder had settled into a rhythm that felt like a deep, steady breath. I was no longer the assistant hiding in the shadows. I had opened my own consultancy, helping artists manage the business side of their passion. Benjamin was a constant, a quiet, sturdy presence. We were sitting on a park bench watching the golden hour light hit the mountains when my phone vibrated. An email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply a request. I opened it to find a message from Ray Watts. He wasn't the arrogant mogul I remembered. His words were professional, but held a trace of exhaustion. "Maggie, I'm writing because I don't know who else to turn to. Brooke has moved to Europe. Ferdinand is somewhere in the Midwest. I am retired now, raising my granddaughter, Elara, alone. She found an old photo of you in a box of Ferdinand's things. She keeps asking who the kind lady is." My heart gave a painful tug. I looked at Benjamin, then down at Booma, who was sitting at my feet. He looked up with those knowing, soulful eyes, as if he already knew what the email said. "Ray Watts wants me to meet the daughter," I whispered. Benjamin didn't flinch. "What do you want to do, Mags?" he asked. "I want to see if she's okay," I said. "Ferdinand and Brooke treated that child like a failed experiment. I want her to know she's a person, not a mistake." A week later, I stood in a quiet garden in Santa Fe. A little girl with a wild mane of frizzy red hair and a slightly recessed chin was crouched in the dirt, examining a ladybug. She didn't look like a designer baby. She looked like the boy I'd once loved mixed with the girl I'd once known. When she looked up, her eyes were bright and curious. She didn't have her mother's porcelain skin or her father's polished veneer. She had something better. She had a soul that hadn't been edited yet. Booma trotted forward, his tail wagging in a slow, gentle circle. He didn't bark, he just sat down a few feet away, watching her with a calm, protective dignity. Elara reached out a small, dirt-streaked hand and touched his scruffy fur. She whispered, "He's soft."